And we are live. Greg, mate.
What's up?
Welcome back.
Yeah, well, no one really needs to know I'm back, but I guess...
They don't need to know that, but I just think in the interest of full transparency,
right.
we can let everyone know that this is the second time you've been on the podcast.
Yeah, we recorded a full, hour and a half the other day.
That we fucked up.
Yeah.
We won't mention who.
Yeah, I'm a busy guy, you know?
We won't mention who. He is sitting just outside the podcast, but he will remain anonymous. No, look, it's no one's fault, man. But, we recorded a good hour and 10 minutes of pure gold, and it's gone. It's lost in the ether.
Well, let's try it again.
But we'll get it back. Yeah, mate, so just tell me everything that you told me before, really. Go.
Oh, shit. I don't even remember.
No, mate, how you been? How did you go to the gym after our first effort?
Yeah, I did. I went to the gym. I did I did a little bit of working out. You know, I've been trying to get back in shape. I mean, I'm just trying to kind of get, I think for me, I've always fluctuated, weight-wise. Ever since, when I was little, I was little fat kid. And then...
Cute little fat Greg.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, maybe now, I guess I was cute sometimes, but, I struggled with being overweight for, many years of my life. And then actually... when I was in high school, I became anorexic.
Oh,
which
really?
A lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
And, looking back now, sometimes when I go back to my mom's and I, look at photos, it kind of freaks me out because I remember back then thinking I was still fat and I was, super, skin and bones.
Yeah.
And,
body dysmorphia.
Yeah,
vibes.
body dysmorphia. Yeah. So I still have that, and it's taken me a while to... I kind of, fortunately, I stopped, excuse me, I stopped, I don't know, I went to the doctor, but I didn't have to really go through a proper, rehab or something. I sort of just kind of, I don't want to say snapped out of it, but, I don't remember what it was, but something, kind of said, okay, maybe, this isn't healthy.
Something changed, but so was the doctor a clinical doctor, not like a
just
doctor?
like a clinical doctor.
How
I think.
is that then? Because I can, some people's experiences with doctors can be quite, what's the word? Quite kind of clinical and cold. You know?
I just remember, speaking about it now, I just remember kind of going and the doctor telling me that I, had a problem and just kind of laughing because I didn't think I did. And,
you laughing?
I was laughing.
Not the
yeah.
not
No, not the doctor.
Because that would be really fucked up.
Yeah, that'd be fucked up. So, after that, I kind of, in high school, then after that though, it's I kind of stayed slim. When I was in high school, I actually did I wasn't a sports guy, but I did for some reason. I think at that point, once I realized, okay, I had lost weight and I don't ever want to be big again, or, I was so I joined cross country and track. And I did that in high school, and, I wasn't super competitive, but I did think it was fun.
What, but were you doing that to kind of help you maintain?
Yeah, I think at that point, I just was I want to... I don't know. I think part of it was just because when I did start losing weight, I was working out and stuff, and then.
But how did, if you don't mind talking about it, which it seems like you don't, how did your what did you say, anorexia?
Yeah.
How did that manifest? So you were saying you were quite big, but then when you had anorexia, you were very slim, or my understanding of anorexia is quite basic. But interestingly enough, when I was going to therapy at one point in my life, my therapist, who was incredible, she specialized in eating disorders, and what she was saying is that there's a lot of men who suffer with eating disorders, but they don't really come forward, on it. It's
right.
It's often quite hidden. So pretty much all of her clients were like female. But it's something, you know, I'm really interested in kind of all forms of like addictions and like mental health issues, and you know, and I've kind of had weird relationships with food before and still do now. But I'm interested to kind of hear a little bit more about.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, obviously, I mean, now it's like I still kind of, you know, I still kind of fluctuate my weight. I mean, I was, so I lost weight, you know, and then I guess at the time when I say like I was anorexic, it was to the point where I was sort of, you know, I was losing like muscle mass and I was skinnier than I should be. And it was, you know, it's to the point where, you know, obviously I don't think it was necessarily healthy.
Yeah.
And I don't remember very much at the time. I mean, I just remember like I never had like, you know, I was never bulimic, and I never, and I don't even really remember what I like recall like what I ate or didn't eat, but I just remember like as soon as I was done eating, I would like start like working out and like, you know, doing sit-ups and push-ups and stuff. And
you like in relation to what you just eaten? Like,
yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
fuck, I've just eaten this like burger and fries or whatever, so I better
I also,
get on the treadmill.
Yeah, I also, you know, even going back to my mom, you know, my mom's 80 years old, and, you know, she can't even like really get around too much, but she's always, you know, super concerned about cooking me food. And, you know, I've also noticed that...
What, like in a kind of what you might describe healthy way, or like a
no,
bit of a
like,
feeder? Like,
no, I mean, I could, like, you know, I also noticed too, like, you know, my wife would make fun of me, like, when I would cook, because I would always, like, put a lot of oil, and I'd put it really hot, and I realized, like, recently, that's because, like, that's kind of how my mom cooked. She'd always cook with, like, a lot of oil, and everything was sort of, like, you know, fried and things like that. Little greasy.
Delicious.
Yeah, no, of course. But even now, I mean, like this last time I was there, I mean, she had cooked, and I was like, it was hard to, you know, I was like, I don't know, maybe it's like living in LA now. You know, I kind of like used to, you know, not that I eat the healthiest now, but, you know, I'm vegan. And
you got a refined palate.
Yeah, I'm not, you know, I mean, I'm eating a lot more things that are organic and, you know, not like this kind of like sort of,
well, it happened
junk food.
It happened to
like
me,
that.
man. Like when I've lived in LA this time for a year, but I used to live here probably like 6-7 years ago for a couple of years, and during that time, I went vegan for a while, and I remember like a good friend coming over, and I'd been like strict vegan for probably like 2 or 3 months, and he'd done a similar thing. So when he came over, you know, you're right, like LA has got that really healthy side to it, but it still definitely has all the junk food if you want it. So when he came over, he was like, look, we've both done this, like let's just go to like a crazy like barbecue restaurant and just eat whatever we want. And I was so hyped for it, like so into it, but same thing, man. When I went there, ordered like a baby back ribs, mac and cheese, it all kind of tasted really gross, you know. It was too much, man. It was just like too rich, too salty.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem with kind of like American, if you want to say like American food, or like, you know, even sort of like you know, not even fast food, but just like, you know, going out to eat. It's like we use a lot of salt, there's a lot of sugar, a lot of oil, and
just a lot of everything.
Yeah, a lot of everything.
From the product or the produce through to like the marketing.
Sure.
It's a full-on country, right? I mean, the UK is kind of similar, following in your footsteps, but it is a very full-on country. Yeah. But yeah, you're vegan.
Yeah, I mean, I've been vegan now for I've lived in LA about 5 years, and I've been vegan for I think about 4 of it. I'm not a purist vegan. You know, I read like I consider myself plant-based. I mean, I do it for more, I think, ethical reasons than anything. But, you know, a lot of the reason I stopped eating meat again was because of you know, a lot of the like documentaries and like, you know, books. Like I read like Fast Food Nation and stuff, and
Cowspiracy.
You know, yeah, well, this was even before that, but yeah, of course. But you know, this was kind of before that. I just was really uncomfortable about not really knowing where the food was coming from, and you know, with meat. I mean, you know, you could say the same for vegetables and stuff like that, but you know, with meat especially, it just was a lot. I just felt like, okay, well, if I eat vegetables, then I have a better chance of, not putting these like toxins in my body. And then, it's always kind of been an ethical thing for me too. Cause like when I was 15, I kind of got into punk rock. And then also around the same time, I got into animal rights and activism and stuff. And now I'm definitely a vegan for the ethical aspect, for just trying to, live my life, with as much compassion for like,
not trying to murder the animals.
Yeah. I mean, just trying to kind of like, I just think there's with so much suffering in the world, it's like, do we really like need to do more? And, the way that we get our meat now is so different than how it used to be, and so, like with, most of the meat, especially in America, is all factory farming. And I mean, it's horrible, I mean, there's been so much, many documentaries and, people have seen photos and videos, and it's just, to me, it's just disgusting, the way, and I think, a lot is to be said about a society that, puts such little value on like an animal's life, that they would treat it, so much as a commodity, that it, eventually it leads to, how they also treat, human beings.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's something to be said for trying to avoid, supporting that industry. And unfortunately, there's not many ways to do that except, if you go and hunt your own food, or, you're very conscious of where the food is coming from, you know? So I kind of, I treat it sort of as a personal choice. And if people ask me about it, I'll tell them how I feel, but I don't necessarily consider myself like an activist in the sense of, well, I mean, I guess that's where, that's the problem with animal rights activists, is that, come off like preachy and like, especially when I was younger, I kind of like, the thing that kind of really took me sort of out of it was like the classism, like in the sense of like, it's actually not that. It's like kind of a fallacy that if you're on a low income, that it's cheaper to get meat, because actually it's not really. I mean, if you actually start breaking it down, you can actually like feed your family for fine without eating meat, or really eating little meat. I mean, most of the world, doesn't. I don't say most of the world, but like. So, but I don't know. I think it's just this kind of idea that, people I think feel that vegans think they're better than other people. And, it definitely, I see that a lot of times with vegans, and I see that, and I saw that a lot when I was younger, and it sort of turned me off because, I feel like, I think it kind of, we're kind of talking about this the other day, but I think it just goes
in the lost tapes.
Yeah, the lost tapes. I think it just goes back into, I don't even remember if we talked about this, but thinking about it now, just, we obviously, the political climate we live in is, very cantankerous, and we're all kind of, it's scary and it's unknown, and because of the internet, the news cycle is so fast. And I think what happens because of the internet, you have less people kind of just talking to each other, just like regular human beings. And
you mean like even if they're kind of on opposing sides?
Right, and like really trying to listen to what other people have to say, and not judging somebody because of what they eat or who they voted for or where they live. You know what I mean?
Dude, no, totally, man. Because I think, when you were saying about that, like I often have an issue with kind of like labels, so I am a vegan, rather than just you're a person that like eats plant-based. And it's fine if if you're into labels, that's all good. But the interesting part of what you're saying, I think, so I've noticed that this before, is you can have like a really moral kind of viewpoint, like being a vegan. It's an awesome thing to do. There's no arguing against that. But you can have this label vegan and still be more attached to your label, I am a vegan, and the kind of superiority that could come with that, than just the actual diet itself. you know. And I think that's really interesting what you're saying, like politically as well. You see it all the time. People that are more attached to this identity they have rather than like the thing, like what, you know, the solution.
Sure.
So you rarely get two people on opposing sides just having a conversation, as you say. They're just fighting for their label, their point of view, you know, their stance.
Well, I think the other problem is a lot of times people form their beliefs on how they personally feel rather than, you know, unfortunately, even facts. You know, it's like, I feel this way, so this is what's correct. Yeah. Rather than, you know, maybe doing some research or, you know, really looking at their, you know, the reality of the situation. So, and I think that's, you know, that's just something that we have to kind of all kind of deal with because, you know, really at the end of the day, it's like, you know, we are kind of a lot of times just doing things like, and it's like, okay, this is personally beneficial for me to think this way or feel this way, you know? So, I mean, it also, you know, like there's a lot of, you know, there's like, you know, a lot of tribalism. I mean, it's a lot of people who, you know, we also live in a time where, you know, you want to quote unquote cancel culture or, you know, if you say the wrong thing, if you think the wrong way, depending on, you know, what, you know, especially as a creative or an artist, you know, if you have any kind of view that sort of goes against what people generally feel you should have, you know, you can be ostracized. You get
shut down.
You get shut down. And, you know, and I think that, you know, there's nothing wrong with, you know, not supporting somebody and not, you know, in saying like, look, I'm not going to support this person because I don't like the way they talk. But I think it's like trying to shut somebody down. You know, that's something that I you know, the craziest thing I think I started seeing with when, you know, Trump became president was, all of a sudden, like, the quote-unquote liberals or left were, like, the ones that were trying to silence people, right? Like, they were saying, like, you shouldn't be able to speak if you feel this way. And it got all twisted because for me, you know, especially being an artist, is like I've always thought that, you know, free speech, freedom of expression, you know, is like one of the most important things. You know, it's kind of like it's something that, you know, is just part of like natural law. You know what I mean? It's like this idea of us to, you know, to be able to say how we feel. And I don't know. It just kind of got like weird to me.
No, I agree with that, man. It's like free speech is something that should work 360, right? All the way around, no matter what your opinion is. And I appreciate what you're saying because I noticed that too, that it's like there's popular opinion, and it's not even if you oppose like popular opinion, but it's almost like if you have, sometimes it feels like if you have anything to say to challenge that in any way, you can just be shut down and ostracized. And the only problem with that is that then there's no room to kind of back and forth and like evolve and grow. You know, it's like this is how it is. And also sometimes I feel like that's a clear indication again that people are attached to a point of view or attached to an argument more than they want a solution.
But I think, you know, I think it's also on the internet more than real life. And I think obviously when we're talking a lot about these things, you know, it's hard to, you know, it's hard to talk about it in the context of, you know, your day-to-day interactions because generally speaking, you know, and this is one thing I talked about, like for instance with Facebook, you know, just, you know, it's like the worst thing you could do is start, you know, is to disagree or criticize somebody on their own Facebook post because it essentially becomes like going in. It's like going into someone's living room and being like, I don't agree with you, like you're wrong, you know. And it's like most people would never do that, right? Like I mean,
people
it's different.
But
I mean, it's different obviously if you're doing like a demonstration or a protest. But just like on a day-to-day schedule, you're not like running up to somebody in the street and thinking like, who did you vote for? What do you think? You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, where, you know, with Facebook, it's like, you know, people are letting that known. So, I mean, I think that's just kind of goes into technology and sort of where we are with that. And
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, we were talking a bit about that as well on social media, like leading on from what we were just talking about kind of like going against popular opinion. And it's the same on Instagram, right? We were talking about the fact that if you are a person on Instagram, especially a person with a big following, it kind of is supposed to be just this place where you just like upload your stuff and everyone goes, "You're amazing, you're brilliant." And then if anybody calls you out for anything, it's like shut down, you know, the kind of the dogs are set upon them. It's usually the fans of the person in the first place.
Well, and I think, you know, I mean, that's the hard part too, right? Is because everybody sort of has different opinions on where the right place to talk about something is, right? And there's really no real answer to that because, you know, there's some people that think that people that have a platform should not use it, and there's other people that think they should totally use it. You know what I mean? And I veer to the side of, you know, I think if somebody's passionate about something, I think that if you become, you know, a celebrity and like rich and famous, I mean, if that's, I mean, that's like a perfect place to start talking about it. You know what I mean?
How do you feel when like celebrities accept awards?
Yeah, I mean,
drill down on their.
Well, I mean, I think that it's. I mean, you know, for me, I think people put that down.
Yeah.
But I don't. It's rare that I think that people are doing it to get attention. I think that the people that do that are doing it because they're passionate
in the moment.
Well, they're passionate about what they feel, and they see an opportunity, and so I think. I'm all for it. I think that if somebody's passionate about something and they have the opportunity to use their fame, I think it's just I think it just really comes down to the person, and if the person is not only if they're passionate, but if they're being truthful about what they believe, genuine.
It's case by case,
case, yeah. But I think I have nothing wrong. I mean, I don't feel like I don't think that you shouldn't use it. So I think
it's also oh shit, what was I going to say?
Well, but I do think the one problem with the internet, and I've noticed, I've had this instance with friends, and I have a friend in particular who had posted something, and it affected a deal that he was doing with somebody.
Yeah.
Where like they didn't like his political opinion, and so they decided not to work with him.
Right.
And I told him, I said, look, man, I said, you, like, we know, like, your friends and people that know you know how you feel.
Yeah.
You know, you're a compassionate person. You wear your heart on your sleeve. Like, you're a good, well-hearted individual. And you know what? You don't have to comment on every single thing in the news. And I think that's...
So wait, you were talking to the person with the view? They
had posted something, and they were upset because they were almost like, man, maybe I should have never said anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's not like you shouldn't say something, but I think nowadays you do have to like sort of choose your battles.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people who, you know, as soon as something's in the news cycle, they want their opinion to be known. And a lot of the reason is like, you know, there's been the term like virtue signaling. You know, it's this idea that people want other people to know that they're a good person. So if they don't say something, then they think, well, if I don't say this, then people are going to think that I think otherwise. So I need to make myself known. But I think the problem with that is it's disingenuous sometimes, and I think also what happens is a lot of times news changes. You know, on both sides. It's like, you know, it's like somebody who, you know, says, you know, a terrorist attack happens, and all of a sudden it's going to blame like it's like, oh, that was obviously Islamic terrorism, and then it comes out to be like a white person or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like. I think a lot of times that, you know, people sort of need to sort of let things kind of happen before they make comments. And I think that's really, that's the thing about, I think, apart from even trying to maybe, people try to say, oh, I want to stay off social media and I don't want to be on it. I think it's more like how you react to things is what's more important. Just like real life, you know what I mean? It's like, I think as you get older and wiser, you realize that sometimes like talking less is better. Yeah. Like when you're in conversations, it's kind of like maybe listen more and say things when you feel like, okay, this is what I believe. This is truthful of what I'm saying, and not necessarily being the one who has to make a comment about everything. And I think with social media, I think that's what a lot of people can do too, is really choose their battles and choose when to say, okay, I post my art all the time, but I need to post this. Like, like now, because it's going to be the election, I mean, we're going to see a lot of that. A lot of people are going to be posting how they feel and that people should go out and vote and da-da-da-da-da. And I think people just need to kind of expect that, because, it's a important time. It's always an important time when a vote comes up, because, especially in America, because we're, we're representative democracy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the way that, we're, if you don't agree with someone, you're supposed to go out and vote and like put somebody new in, right?
Yeah.
Like on a very basic level. Obviously, you could talk about, other things, but that's the sort of the basic idea.
Do you use your social media platform to try and influence or sway people to vote, or like which way to vote, or do you use it to just encourage people to vote? Are you one of those?
No, I don't really, I would say like, okay, like Instagram, I kind of don't post anything like quote unquote political. It's either like something related to Mishka or some kind of weird photo or something, some like weird
You got a lot of weird photos.
Yeah, like some collectible that I bought or something.
Yeah.
I don't use Twitter too much, but if I do, I kind of mostly keep Twitter sort of lighthearted. Like I'm kind of mostly just like making kind of jokes, like one-liner type things. And then with Facebook, Facebook is where I struggle with, because I think Facebook, it's really easy to sort of, get political. So now, do
you get dragged in?
I do get dragged in sometimes, and I've kind of learned the hard way that it's not good for me to do that.
Does it ever end well?
Never.
It never does, right?
Never does. No.
I mean, no. I feel like I've learned that, because I'm the same, man. There's so many points in my life where I'm like, why didn't you just keep your mouth shut? But they usually are in like real life or in physical life, like not on social media. I've kind of got into a good habit with that, where I just keep my opinions kind of off it for the easier life, because it just never, it's like goes back to what we were saying. You can never find common ground, it seems, when there's two different opinions on social media.
It's that, and it's also like people start to assume things about you, and I've definitely heard that in certain communities where like, oh, I didn't know Greg is like, he's like this like conservative Trump supporter, and like I'm.
But
like,
you're not, right? You made this Trump toy.
Yeah.
I like that.
I'm
very,
like
very accurate.
I'm more like, again, I don't really have, I sort of like have kind of ideas that I feel, but I think now it's just a hard time, because you wanna sort of talk about politics because everyone else is, but then a lot of times like none of us really know what the fuck we're talking about, and a lot of times too, we live in such a privileged country where we, especially when you start traveling the world, you realize like how different America is than a lot of other countries, and sort of like the kind of freedoms that we have, and you start to you realize like how much we take advantage of that, and so I think also too, you sort of kind of have to think, all right, well, what do I like? what do I think? It's hard. I mean, it's hard because I think that's the one thing about America is like you don't have to think a certain way, right? Like, you can sort of kind of feel any way you want, and the idea is like you're allowed to do that. I mean, even to the point where like Nazis can fucking walk on the street and they're protected by police, because that's America. You know what I mean? It's like you can kind of believe anything you want, and the idea is that, but that doesn't mean that people have to respect it.
Yeah, I see that, man. It's like the kind of like good can triumph in a kind of free manner, right?
Right.
It's not like the powers that be, or they're not supposed to be kind of shutting things down, right? So that there's only one popular opinion. This is a country with kind of like all sorts of opinions in the melting pot, which should be a good thing, right? Because the kind of like the moral and the just should rise to the surface, right? And on its own merit.
And it's hard because like I think now there's a lot going on with how much power do we want the government to have? Because
how much power do you want them to have, Greg?
Well, it's a hard question because like if someone's like, well, if I'm like, well, I don't want them to have much power, then you could bring up like the civil rights movement, right? And be like, well, wasn't it good that that we passed like the government sent the National Guard in to make sure that people could that black people could go to school, in an integrated society, what if the government didn't pass, like what if there wasn't like the 13th Amendment, even though people might argue, okay, well...
What's that one? The guns one?
No, the 13th Amendment's the one that ended slavery.
Okay.
Except if you're like a prisoner, then that, and that's where it got kind of... But I'm saying like, the thing is though, is at what point, it's like to just say like, can things sort of work themselves out? And then you're like, well, possibly they can't unless the government's involved. You know what I mean? So it's hard. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I was like listening to a podcast today, speaking of podcasts, and it was actually like Joe Rogan was talking to, I can't remember his name, but he's an astronaut, right? And he was talking about how if it wasn't for the private sector, right? Because like they were talking about how when astronauts go up to space, now like to go from like the space station, right? They have to use Russian equipment. It's like it's all Russia, and he's kind of like saying like what happened, and it was because we as a country decided like we weren't going to invest like as much money into the development, and now that there's like all these private, like Elon Musk and like Jeff Bezos and like, the Virgin, I don't know, Richard, the Virgin guy, there's like all these companies. Richard Branson. I mean, I don't know if he still has it, but even like, all these companies kind of.
God, that's terrible. I don't know the 13th Amendment, but I know Richard Branson.
But, because if it wasn't for all these private companies, there wouldn't be all this, new technology. And he's talking about how like in 2020 it's going to kind of just be a whole new, like it's the beginning of like space travel, where it's going to start with where the government is still the biggest customer of these private corporations, but then it's kind of like, okay, once they figure this out, just like like anything else, it's like, okay, now these companies can take people into space, right? And I mean, and so it's hard because it's a hard example because there's times where it's like, yeah, you want the government involved, especially when it comes to like the rights of certain individuals, and then there's other times where you're like, do I really want the government to control all aspects of my life. You know, is it better to have competition or choices, you know? And
that's it, man. I think it's difficult as well when, like, you know, you have to think of an alternative that's so big and vast. It's really hard to imagine what that is. I mean, I guess my kind of main issue, and I don't have the answers, do you know what I mean? And I don't expect that we'll kind of like solve these massive issues right here on the podcast, but I guess it just comes down to the fact that the, you know, government and capitalist entities just seem so kind of like power and money driven, right? And it's very slick, and you know, it's kind of, it does seem very void of love and compassion, and I would argue that those are the kinds of things that you really want heading up, like, you know, something so conceptually large as a country,
right?
You know, but again, it's like, well, how, you know, what would that look like? Do we need to get kind of wise old like leaders for the you know, from like an ancient tribe to head it up? Like, I'd imagine they'd have a lot more love and compassion, but
you know, well, like you talk about, let's say, like, you know, Medicare for all, right? Like healthcare for all, and like Bernie Sanders, and you know, all of the critics are like, how is he going to pay for it, right? But instead of saying like, you know what, you're right, like we're the only, you know, kind of like, I don't want to say, you know, we're like the only Western, like only developed country that doesn't have like, you know, national health care. And you're kind of like, of course that should, but it's like, the problem is
just going to move this back a little bit,
the problem is like you said, the issue is so much bigger because like it hasn't been this way, and then you're trying to sort of like do it now. It's almost like you kind of have to do this sort of radical, you know, move
it down and start again.
And and then it's,
which I'm all for as well, though.
I mean, to a point I am too, you know. I'm kind of, you know, the thing for me is like, I'm kind of like, fuck it, like I'm kind of like, I live in the Matrix. Like, I know the tofu steak isn't real, but it tastes good. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, I think that I think the problem is I don't think, and I know like kind of one of the only candidates that was like talking about this was like Andrew Yang, and not that I was like a huge Andrew Yang supporter or not, but you know, he was kind of the only one really talking about how like automation is going to get rid of so many jobs in this world, and that we are going to have to just change the way that as a society of sort of what we're doing and what we're learning, because you know, it's not that it's like automation is becoming more and more part of the reality, and more people are going to be like, less people are going to be needed to do a lot of different jobs. And you know, the focus really needs to be like, well, what jobs are humans going to need to be doing, right? And then also you got to think about AI. To me, that's a huge thing as well, because you know, the idea of AI is becoming more and more a reality. You know, like the idea of
are you scared of AI? Do you believe it's gonna take over? I can't understand. I have trouble understanding you know, the idea that AI would kind of become conscious of itself and then have the ability to kind of like, what am I looking to say? Like replicate life.
Well, I mean, you know, and
it can't happen, right?
Well, the biggest thing, the craziest thing for me, and you know, is like this whole Neuralink thing that Elon Musk is doing, right?
Conspiracy theories with
Greg. I mean, it's not really a conspiracy theory, because you know, he had been warning people about AI, and if you talk to him, Elon Musk, yeah.
Mate, sorry, side note, when he's on Joe Rogan, like saying, you know, he's saying that,
right?
He sounds like some kind of opening narration from like Terminator 2, where he's like,
yeah, well, I'm saying even even
him.
against even off of Joe Rogan, I went to I remember when they did I think it's like about a year ago now, they did the sort of press junket for the Neuralink, and it was like super crazy. Like you were watching like this can't be real. Like it's almost like if you go to a ride at like Disney or you're watching a movie where they're it's like anytime you watch these post-apocalyptic movies, they all start with this montage of like the news of like how it all kind of happened, how the machines took over, or the virus that wiped out, most of the earth, and like almost like this is how we're here now. And you kind of watch that thing and you sort of are like, okay, this is pretty crazy, because he's talking about technology that is supposed to start happening this year, where you can connect a human brain to a machine. And they're at the point where they're going to be, and I'm sure they've already done it because of, I don't know, I'm not accusing anyone, but it's like, you have to imagine that they've like tested this out. But and it's also too, they're propagating it as a way to help people who, let's say, have like neurological disorders, or like can't move their arms or legs, and maybe this will help it. But essentially you're kind of like coming up with this idea of like, okay, if you can connect yourself to like a computer and be able to process information as fast as that, like how does it change humanity? And I think the thing with AI is, I think that eventually you're going to have a machine that will be able to solve problems that we couldn't even imagine could be solved. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's I'm not saying that I'm scared of AI, but I definitely think it's going to change like the landscape of things. I think that what's going to happen is, I think AI is going to change the way that we live our life, just like the internet did. Yeah. Right. And, it might be in a, the only quote unquote scary thing is the people who are the farthest advanced with it are like these huge companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook and these and like the government and banks and military, and that's where all the technology is. So how do you feel about these people? Do you trust them?
No.
You know what I mean? And so it doesn't really become a conspiracy. It just becomes like the fact of who has a technology and are they going to use it for bad or good? It's like, I think the idea of like Amazon talking about drones delivering stuff. Like now you and I talking about it, like we're like, that seems like it could happen. But like, let's say like
don't they already do that?
Right. But I'm saying, imagine like a few years ago when like a drone was just like something that went up, you'd be like, I remember when it first came out,
or
in the
even
news.
Before then, when I didn't know what a drone was.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember when Amazon first announced that, it was like everyone was fucking joking about it.
Yeah.
Now though, we would be like, okay, I could see that, or I think it's already happening. You know what I mean? And so it kind of keeps going beyond that. Is it hard to think that they could have a drone that could be used to break up a crowd, or have some type of, just like they do in the military, like, we hear about drone strikes all the time. What's not to say that eventually, like, the police department is going to say, well, we're not going to put our policemen or police officers in harm's way, so we're going to send a drone. And, if like this fucking guy was just on camera shooting somebody, what's to say that this drone isn't going to like fucking shoot him, or like throw out some fucking like, like thing and tackle him. I mean, it's not far-fetched anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because and they
probably do a more accurate job. This is what we're saying, right?
Right.
It's like developing a drone or a robot that could do a kind of more precise, accurate job than any human could.
And we're kind of feeding it. You know, like one thing that I think about a lot is, you know, another thing that kind of used to be conspiracy but now is sort of fact is that, you know, is the government...
The Earth is flat.
Well, I don't believe that, but, you know, is the government listening to us?
Yeah, right.
And we know the answer now is yes.
Yeah. Did you see that? I've seen like I swear it was a documentary. It was on YouTube, and I need to look for it, but it's a little clip, and I believed it. I don't know what the source was, but they're basically saying that you know, the government can turn on your phone.
Sure.
Use your camera, use your microphone, even when your battery's dead, without you knowing that they're doing that.
I mean, I think that's true. I mean, you know, like, I think one of the most, I don't know how to say it, but, you know, like one of the kind of most like monumental things that happened in the past, like, like decade was, you know, Edward Snowden and him saying that the NSA was spying, where the head of the NSA was saying, and then even like President Obama had to admit that it's true, right? And for me, I think, you know, there's so many people that are like, oh, I don't care if they listen to me. Like, what am I going to say? But I think what it is that I look at it this way, right? I think that there's like you start talking about AI and there's technology that you can't understand. Like okay, the idea of God, okay? The idea of God is that God is a omnipotent being, right? That God is everywhere at once and can listen to everything that you're saying. And so to me, that's kind of what AI is, right? Like it's this thing that can take just conversations and then create like data and things of how people, you know, like what people say in certain places. You know, it's kind of like those movies where like somebody can like, you know, it's like Professor X where like he can hear everybody's thoughts. You know, it's like, but imagine, but when he focuses, he can kind of like hear one thing, or like imagine just all this information going into this sort of machine or this idea of machines, and then it could kind of like it just starts to manipulate our lives without us even knowing it. And I'm not saying it's a scary thing, but like that's sort of the reality, and we've allowed that to happen. And so my thing is like, don't be surprised when the government has more control over you than, you know, and I guess it's some, see, but that's the thing is like, I'm not like this like revolutionary that's going to like try to say like, you need to resist this, right? Like I'm not like Alex Jones saying like, you know, you got to resist the technocrats and shit. But it's kind of the reality. Like, you know, I think a lot about money, right? Now we were talking about like yesterday how like
Gucci money clip.
Yeah, like my wife bought me a Gucci money clip because I carry cash, but my wife doesn't carry cash, okay?
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm 40. People that are like, you know, I'd say even people that are in their 30s generally don't carry cash. And you start talking to people in their 20s, they definitely do not carry cash.
I'm in my 30s and I don't carry cash.
Yeah, and you know, and it's, to me, I think a lot about like, okay, how crazy it is that we're allowing ourselves to be controlled by machines and computers, right? Where if you didn't have access to your checking account, like what would you do? Like how would you survive? Like, you know, what if there's like a situation where, like, perfect example, you know, by I think October, you have to have a real ID if you want to travel. This isn't conspiracy. This is real. Like, if you don't have a real ID, then you cannot travel throughout the country.
Yeah.
Because there's a chip in it. Just like, if you have a passport, it's fine because a passport has a chip in it, right? We don't know what they can control or not, but we know that if there's some type of technology, but my license now, it doesn't have any kind of chip. It might have features like holograms and shit, so you can't do it, but there's no kind of chip. But I'm not saying, but if you want to be scared about, you don't have to be scared about conspiracy. You can be scared about what's actually happening. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you can't travel unless you have a chip. Then what else can't you do? Then how many people don't like carrying a wallet? I like carrying my phone. How many times does your phone die? Fuck this, man, I can't load this shit. So then it's like, well, let's wear a bracelet, okay? Fuck, I don't want to put a bracelet on. Then it's like, okay, let's put the chip in our body. And it's not, and it's not even that far off because you're like, and then, I mean, it's even been in the news where I forget where it was. It was in the United States or it was either in the United States or I think it might have been in Scandinavia where a company had, I think it was still optional, but I think almost all the employees did it, was this company gave the option for the employees to inject a chip into their arm or their hand, where they could use it to clock in and clock out and use it for commissary and, things like that. And where that would have been scary 30 years ago, now I think people, especially young people, would be totally into it because as it stands, they don't like carrying money. Yeah. They don't like carrying wallets. They don't like having cards. They like to have things on their phone. And then at a certain point, it's like, well, why even deal with it on my phone? But then that's where it gets really fucked. To me, that's where it could get scary because then it's like, okay, who's in control of that chip? And who's to say that what's the next thing that you have to do to make sure that the money goes on your chip? Do you have to, I don't know, I'm definitely pro-vaccine, right? I'm not an anti-vaxxer. But what if it got to the point where it was you have to get a flu shot? Well, I don't like to get flu shots because I feel fine. Well, if you don't get a flu shot, then your chip doesn't work. The banks say, well, we can't risk you being not having this shot because you might make other people sick. Yeah. So you have to get the shot or you can't do this or that. And I think that's where things are heading. And I think if you want to talk about anything scary, and it's just, to me, it kind of it's sort of the, it's just sort of technology kind of taking over humanity. And I don't...
Well, that chip that you're talking about, it kind of just is the phone at the minute, right?
Right.
I mean, everything, most things run through your phone these days, from everything you're talking about, social media, the way we communicate, obviously, with each other, but then money, now more and more, all your cards are not cards anymore, they're on your phone. Right. So I mean, I agree with you, man. I think it could head to a much more kind of scary place, but they could be doing that now. If your phone privileges were taken away because you didn't do this, that, or the other, right, you'd be pretty fucked.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me it becomes scary when you think about what's going on now. And we talked about this the other day about what's going on in China
in the lost tapes.
Yeah, and I was saying how for me, it's really I'm scared. I mean, obviously, I care about people and humanity, people dying.
And Mishka's very big in China.
But Mishka's very big in China. So we have 70 stores in China. We have a Mishka China. It's a really big part of our business. And if but it's a big part of everybody's business. When Trump was having these trade wars with China and there was all these tariffs and shit, people were freaked out because we're so dependent on trade. And, it's fucking Walmart, Target, dollar stores, like how much shit do we buy that's made in China on a daily basis? You know what I mean? So, but when you start thinking also about just a virus that could become out of control, right? Like then you start thinking about, well, how, like what is, when I just went to Japan, right? And I've started wearing masks when I fly on planes in general, because I fly so much and I see like, okay, this plane just came from Asia, or this plane just came from LA to New York, and then I'm getting on the plane like 15 minutes later. They're not disinfecting it. They're having somebody come in and vacuum and straighten shit up, but like, I don't know who was sitting on the seat.
Yeah, it's a little concentrated box of whatever.
Yeah, so I generally wear masks when I'm on the plane, just to kind of like, for whatever it's worth. I don't know if, trying just to stay as healthy. But when I tried to go just 2 weeks ago, when I was like, I'm going to go to CVS and grab some masks, they were all sold out.
Yeah.
I went to Home Depot, all sold out. Even when I got to Japan, if you've been to Japan, you can buy face masks like any corner grocery store. They were sold out. My point being is like, if you don't have money, right? If you don't have something that you can really tangible, like what's the point of having money in an account on a phone when you can't you need something like a face mask, or you need something where, okay, all the computers are down, or so I don't know. I start to think of it kind of hurts my head though too, because I'm like, what am I saying? Like, what am I getting at? Like, am I prepared? No.
Yeah.
Do I have like a fallout shelter or a bunker? Like, I don't have really, like, I know I should have some storable food. I know I should have some storable water. I do own a gun because I think it's important, especially if shit hit the fan and, someone's trying to break into your house and, trying to get what you have because they don't,
But you can have all that stuff and still just get hit by a bus. You know what
I
mean?
No. Well, I'm saying preparing yourself for sort of a bigger kind of epidemic. Yeah, of course. I mean, of course, anything could happen. I'm not saying. I'm saying preparing yourself for like the worst.
Yeah.
Right. And
but
I don't think a lot of people are really thinking that way.
No, but do you know what while we're talking about this, something that I always think as well is, it always seems like it's like it's people that are in maybe more of a privileged position that are always kind of concerned about, are things going to get worse? Because there's an argument for the fact that if you over the past however many years, that if you look at like humanity, or if you look on a global scale, taking everyone into consideration,
right,
has anything really got any worse or any better, or is it just moving around? Okay, so these people are fucked for a bit, and now it's more these people.
Things are definitely getting better. I just think when you say privilege, I think, to me, I look at it as people who live in like bigger cities like us.
Yeah.
Because if you live in like kind of more, like not in a big city, you probably have a house, you probably have things, you probably have land. You're probably not too worried if something's going to happen.
But what I mean as well is, like, if you're like a homeless person on the streets of LA, you ain't worried about AI. You know what I mean? Or if you're in a country that's just fucked for industry and money, you're not worried about that. That's all I mean. And
well, I mean, but at the same time, I think one thing that is kind of exciting about AI and technology is that you can be living in a country that maybe doesn't have the same resources or same opportunities, but if you could like get in a situation where you could learn how to use a computer and you could learn the skill of this kind of thing, you can sort of be as powerful as anyone else. And I think that was kind of going to the point of like having to just, as a society, I guess saying like, right, like most of us that live in these bigger cities are pretty much like worthless. You know what I mean? Like if shit hit the fan, like there's not much, like we're not very resourceful.
Yeah, we're completely dependent on...
I guess that's where I'm getting at. It's just that like we're so completely dependent on certain things that like we're not thinking about, you know, what if we didn't have this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, and to me, like what I'm saying though is I think it's just sort of something to think about. I'm not saying that
it's interest, very
you know,
interesting.
it's just, to me, it's just, I guess what I'm saying, it's just something that I think about, you know, and I think about like, I think about it a lot, and I just, you know, and I don't necessarily know what my, like why I think about it. I just think it's just I just do because I sort of see how the world's changing. I mean, I think
it's
there's
interesting,
this,
man.
well, there's also this kind of idea of like being woke, right? And I think to me, the idea of being woke is just sort of like seeing the world except for like your little bubble, right? And once you look at the rest of the world and you say like, okay, here are things the way going on here. Here's the way technology's going. Here's the way food production's going. Once you start thinking about those things, you're either like, oh man, we're fucked, or you're thinking like, oh man, like I really need to like change the way I live my life.
Yeah.
Or you're like, oh fuck, I need to warn people of what's happening. Or you're just like, oh, fuck it, like, I don't care, like, I can't wait till, like, a meteor hits us or, like, a virus comes and wipes us all out, because there's no
you're
hope.
out the bubble. You're,
right.
You're kind of looking back in.
Yeah, and that's how I feel. Like, I feel like I'm out the bubble. I mean, but I feel like I've been that way for a long time, ever since I was a kid, you know, because, like, part of getting into punk rock or any kind of counterculture is I think all of a sudden you start looking at things like, you're like, oh, fuck, like, damn, like, the government's fucked up, like religion is fucked up, like the way, you know, like fuck, like I didn't realize, like, you know, the true history of like our country or the world, or, you know, you start to think like, wait, I only learned about this in school, I never learned about this, you know what I mean? And you're like, holy fuck, I didn't know that happened. I didn't know this is why we got into this war. I didn't know this person existed. I didn't know, you know, and then all of a sudden you're just like, oh fuck, like what else isn't true? What else don't I know?
Well, that's it, man. And it goes back to like the veganism thing when I was stumbling over my words, but it's like, oh fuck, you know, maybe I'm just eating meat because I've been conditioned to or told to, and the marketing's really good,
right?
You know, and the marketing for salad isn't so glamorous,
right?
But I agree with that, man. It's like that's the kind of level of consciousness it takes to like transcend that bubble and start making some decisions that aren't overtly influenced by the bubble.
And the thing I will say is, I think, you know, I do appreciate that there's more of this kind of discussion. You know, there's a lot more people out there kind of talking about these things, and if you want to learn and you want to hear other opinions, I mean, that's one great thing about, you know, like internet, multimedia, whatever, is that you can listen to people. I mean, even now, I mean, maybe somebody's listening to us and thinking like, oh, I never thought about that, right? And so I think that's the most important thing that's going on, especially, you know, we're you know, talking about like how everyone's doing a podcast now. It's like, who fucking cares? Good. Like everyone have a podcast. Let's all be fucking talking and listening and not, you know, in trying to better ourselves, you know, like let's get into conversations with the idea that maybe the person we're talking to knows more than we do, right? And let's think like, what can we learn from that person that we're talking to? Like, what can like I be taught? How can I be like maybe what I think is true is actually not true, right? And maybe my truths are being like, you know, reworked by every conversation I have. And I think that just makes us all better people. And I think, you know, looking towards the future of like what we want to see the world become or what we don't want it to become is going to be really, you know, us talking to each other and listening to each other and really kind of forming like our own real opinions and not even opinions, but like our own truths, like saying like, no, this is what I believe and this is the reason I believe it. And I'm going to say what I believe because I'm not a phony. I'm not a fake. This is what is real. Right. And then I think if everybody kind of sort of feels that way, it just makes, I think it makes society a better place, you know?
Yes.
In general.
Mate, agreed, man. And it's one kind of important component to this podcast, I think. Well, it is. It's one thing that I was really keen to do and the team's really keen to do. It's like, obviously Secret Walls is a brand and like an art event.
Right.
So the guests that we have on are creative people, but, I'm keen to just talk.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And
it doesn't have to be an artist biography.
I mean, I was happy to talk, and I said, I think we were talking about this. I said,
mate, you went off.
Yeah, I mean, I said, like, look, if you want to know about the brand and about Greg Mishka and about Mishka NYC, there are interviews out there. It's like you can. I mean, I know we're kind of, I could do the shameless plugs. Like, you could follow me on Greg Mishka. You can go to our site Mishkagram, on Instagram. You can go to mishkanyc.com. And you can kind of
we'll put all that in all the comments and the descriptions.
You can kind of see like what I'm doing. But I also just like talking about like life and about things. So I like the opportunity to talk to other people about whatever. You know?
Man.
So I think it's cool. And like you said, whatever direction it goes in, and obviously it went into whatever direction, but.
Mate, you went off. It's great.
All right.
It's great, dude. Do you know one thing I really wanted to ask you about?
Sure.
Is your is the CES device? Is that what it's called? A CES device?
No, the Fisher Wallace. Yeah,
the Fisher Wallace. Like I refer to it as the Mind-Zapper.
Yeah, it was. Fuck. It's really funny. I can't think. Basically what it is it's actually older technology and.
Did it come from a place of fun, or did it come? What was the catalyst for developing it? Was it a bit of fun, or did it come from some kind of desire?
Well, I think what happened is the guy Kelly, who's one of the partners in the company. So
in Fisher Wallace,
right? So Fisher Wallace.
They sound like the bad guys.
Actually,
from
like
a Terminator
do you know like Fisher, like the electronics, the electronic company?
Fisher Price.
No, like they were more
Fisher
popular.
Price for kids.
But like Fisher was like a electronics company that was like popular in the 80s, okay. Right? And one of the founders was like from like kind of had that like was from that family, so invested some money. It's funny because like I still use a device. I don't use it as often as I did in the past, but the technology was essentially something that's been around for a long time. And what it does is it's a kind of proprietary frequency that sends these like tiny electric shocks to the part of your brain that affects your mood and your like creativity. And so it's pretty crazy because you put it on and it you feel something, right? And then after using it for a while, the first thing that I was told that I would experience, which is totally true, is you start to have very vivid dreams.
Right.
Which to me was really cool because I love. I mean, that's a whole other thing.
And you did.
Oh, I did, and that's a whole other thing. Is I love like dreams and like about like the meaning and like lucid dreaming and controlling your dreams and how it can affect your life and what it means and all this shit. But that was one thing. The other thing was that, this was at a time where, this is a whole other thing, but I do struggle with depression, and I do have anxiety and I do take medication. And, but this device really helped me with my anxiety because, I was taking, was taking like less medicine, and there's like a lot of research.
So when you started using the machine, you took
but the whole concept of the reason we did a collaboration was because Kelly, one of the guys who was the partner, he liked our art, and the device itself looks very like clinical, right? And it sucks because
you didn't discover the machine.
No, we were approached,
yeah.
and it just sort of they wanted us to design like our version of it, and I think the idea was to also promote it to the sort of youth market, because
how long ago was this, by the way?
This was like 7 or 8 years ago. I mean, now they have there's like an upgradable device that you can connect to VR. So you there's like it's not only is it the stimulation that goes to the brain, but it's also like
trippy visuals.
It's visuals and sound and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's the one thing that it is. I think one of the most successful things that it's been used for is PTSD.
Yeah.
So a lot of I don't know. I mean, I'd have to go to the website to Fisher Wallace to see, but I don't know if they have actual contracts with the government. But I do know that a lot of government facilities do use it to treat PTSD because it does. I'm a believer in it. I mean, it does work. It does help.
So what changed in your outlook that meant that maybe you felt like not as depressed and came off medication?
Well, I'm still taking medication, but I think it definitely helped me just like, I don't know what the right word is. Like, I don't want to say like reset my brain, but it kind of did. Like ever since I had started using it, I definitely don't feel like I was like kind of in a dark place for a couple years and I think me moving out to LA, I think changing my environment and was a big thing, but I do attribute a lot of the positive aspects of my mental health coming from that.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said, I don't use it as much as I do anymore. I've actually been thinking lately that I want to start using it again because, as things have gotten more hectic in my life, like I'm like, okay, like maybe I should start using it again.
What happens when are you? Because I'm the same, man. Again, I'm fascinated with kind of like mental health discussions and
right.
But would you? Do you link it to your creativity? Are you someone that your brain will just take you to like a dark place where you're kind of like thinking a million miles an hour that everything's going
definitely.
wrong?
I mean, it's definitely a kind of meditative as well.
Yeah.
But I think meditation. But I think.
Do you meditate?
I don't. I mean, I'd like to. It's something that I've thought about. I mean,
I'm off and on with it.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, I think that I think the Fisher Wallace device is just another tool, and I think that it's something, especially for people who do not want to take medicine and want to try an alternative to just taking medication. I think that it, or just also enhancing like what you do, because the brain is a very complex system. It's all like it's all like it's like fucking like it's electrical, it's a fucking machine. And being able to sort of control it also, that's what also I'm like kind of really interested, but also very scared about the whole Neuralink thing, because I mean, we've all heard we only use a certain part of our brain, and there's more aspects of it that could be used. And what can we do if we have more capacity? Like, can we change our existence? Can we somehow get to the point where we can manipulate matter? I mean, it's just the sort of the ideas become like you just sort of transcend whatever you could imagine.
But I mean, I like this. I like this topic of conversation. But what are you saying that those kinds of thoughts like freak you out a little bit? On what? On like an existential kind of level?
Yeah,
or
more like an existential kind of level.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like what's the future for humanity?
Do you get freaked out about like what happens after death and the kind of idea of infinity and things like that?
A little bit.
When you go to those kind of very big idea places.
Yeah, I do. I really, I wonder.
I hope I'm not being triggering right now, man.
No. I wonder a lot about consciousness. I wonder a lot about what that means. I wonder, like if you've, I hate to bring up like science fiction into reality, but I think that so much science fiction is like, based on what is real. So I think of like Black Mirror, right? And I think about, especially, I don't think it was this season, but the last season, a lot of it was about, or maybe it was last season, a lot of it was about consciousness and transfer of consciousness. And this idea that your consciousness can be put into some place else. That started tripping me out. And that started really making me think about death and being like, okay, like, is it our soul or is it our consciousness? Can it?
I love this.
Can it go somewhere else?
Yeah.
There's even there's shows now where there's this sort of
Wait, but what do you think about that though? Because I watched all the Black Mirrors. I think they're great, but this idea of like consciousness or like life force energy, right?
Right.
The thing I think is like, how could that be transferred and put somewhere else? Because that to me would be like saying, okay, say you've got someone who like dies of a heart attack, and some people like have a heart attack, their heart stops,
right?
They're clinically kind of like dead, yeah, but then they come back to life, right?
Right.
Other people, no, they stop living, but they still, to all intents and purposes, have a fully operational body, with all the kind of correct nervous system, the brain, everything's still there. So it's like, if you could, could you just get the consciousness and kind of put it back in? No, I think you could.
I mean, I think it's something that you'd have to do more when you're already alive. What
do you mean? Like take the consciousness and that's what I'm saying. It seems so unlikely to me that you could take that and put it in kind of a really advanced little box.
Well, we don't know. I mean, that's the thing. Is like, I mean, what is consciousness? Like, what is our reality, right? Like we, this table, we feel like it's real, like, but what's actually real? Like, are we in a simulation? Is this actually reality, or are we somewhere else? You know what I mean? Like,
I also love this.
It's kind of
life
like
as a play, life is theater,
right? So I mean, there's something to be kind of said for all these thoughts, and sometimes it makes my brain hurt, and I kind of pun intended, I guess, a bit, but it's something that I think about. I mean, it's something that I think is, I do think that like we're bigger than, we're important, but we're also part of something bigger. Mm-hmm. Like I don't discredit the importance that humanity kind of plays on the planet, or maybe even the world, even the universe, because we don't really know, right? Like we don't know why we're here, right? Like we don't know,
and no one does,
right? And we don't know if there's parallel universes where other conversations are going on with other Gregs and Jimmys, or are there
definitely
are there planets and galaxies light years away? Of course there are. How far away are there? Are there stargates? Are there wormholes? Are there ways to travel interdimensionally and across planes and dimensions that we can't even understand?
And even all those things that you've said, they kind of feel like they're happening in like this reality. But it's like, as you're saying, if this was just a kind of like a play, like almost like a virtual reality, and that crumbles, the thing behind that could be inconceivable.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
And mate, I love. We need to do another podcast to go in even further, because that sort of stuff just like blows my mind.
Yeah.
But mate, in the interests of wrapping this up relatively soon, what's next for Mishka, or what's next for you?
Yeah. So just this past year, I guess it's almost a little less than a year. We moved Mishka out from Brooklyn to LA. So now it's just me. I'm no longer with my original partner. And it's me and like 3 other people doing the brand. And, we're sort of kind of figuring out, the great thing about Mishka is we do have a cult following, and we we've kind of stuck to who we are, and I think
You've
people
definitely got a vibe.
I think people can, I think that's the one thing about Mishka is like you can't ever say that we really ever changed who we are, what we did, because I always told people, I said, like, as long as I'm involved with Mishka, like Mishka's gonna be it's gonna be me and what I think, and it's gonna be like, it's gonna be real. I mean, of course, as a brand changes and evolves, like different things happen. But, I think the one thing about Mishka that everyone could say is like, no matter like, brands have come and gone and evolved, but, we've always kind of stuck true to who we are. And,
definitely,
it's a whole other landscape. And, we had some issues, personal issues in the past. And for a couple years, things were a little tough for us. But, I'm kind of like looking at things now as kind of like a brand new adventure. I have a new team. I have actually my old art director, Mike Jones, who actually, was the original illustrator for the Keep Watch Eyeball. I mean, he's working with us again. We have some of our old designers that used to work with us, as part of our team. And I don't know. I mean, now, and just with like, for a while we had talked about the idea of being more of like a direct to customer brand, and that where the future was going for fashion and a lot of business, and that's the case. I mean, I feel like every couple weeks or every month, I mean, like I read the other day, like Macy's is closing like 125 stores. I mean, retail is not what it used to be. Brands aren't necessarily making their money from like wholesale accounts. Amazon has taken a big chunk of the retail market. So we're kind of learning how to maneuver. I mean, I'm getting older, so I'm trying to like also keep like the kind of streetwear, and we talked a little bit about this the other day, is and streetwear and kind of like the culture, the counterculture, the alternative culture. It's all about the youth. It's about youth energy. So I mean, we're continuing that. We're really going to stick to our roots as being like an artist-driven brand. We have a lot more collaborations going on with artists this year and designers. A lot more frequently. We talked about doing more Secret Walls events. Because I think
that Secret Walls collab.
Because I think that's I think the strongest thing about Mishka has always been the art, has always been the graphics. And that's really. We're artists, we're creatives, and that's really who we are. And so, I just moving forward, that's kind of where I'm going and kind of where the brand's going. And then just on a personal level, and this is a whole other topic, but I'm a collector. I'm sort of a bit of a treasure hunter, scavenger, an archivist. I like finding things, and I like telling stories, and I like collecting things that people haven't seen or didn't know existed, or so.
And those things pop up on your
they'll pop up my
page a lot, right?
They pop up my Instagram page.
So everyone should follow you there.
Yeah. So Greg Mishka, Mishka Graham, MishkaNYC.com. That's about it.
Sick, mate.
Yeah, mate.
Just before I forget, I was wearing this T-shirt last time, and I didn't mention it. It's our bootleg collab with Kristen Lu Wong, and it's still got the tag on it because we've got such a limited edition that I'll probably end up selling this. So one lucky listener or viewer will be able to get their hands on this. But yeah, man. So we've got to sort out a collab for this year, I reckon.
Yeah,
with a little event attached to it.
Yeah, well, we did that huge event in China last year.
Yohood.
Was a Yohood, which was awesome. So I think we need to definitely follow up with something pretty epic in LA.
Definitely, man. And it would be good to do something new, but I still really want some kind of eyeball T-shirt. So
we need to do it, for sure.
All right, mate. Look,
all right, mate.
Yeah. thanks for coming in.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, man. It was fun.
Yeah, man. Round 2. I think this was better than the first one.
All right, well,
we smashed it.
All right, cool.
All right, mate. Nice one.
Nice one.